So in this module, System Safety Risk Analysis, we're going to look at how we deal with the complexity of the real world, okay? Because the reason that we're doing system safety, or the reason that we're doing a formal risk analysis, is we've got a complex real world scenario that we need to analyze and understand. And usually we're doing that because we have some moral and legal obligation to do it, and to do it well in order to protect people and prevent harm to people. So, little definition of system safety. Let's start with system safety. So it's the application of engineering and management principles, criteria, and techniques to achieve acceptable risk within a wider context. And this wider context is operational effectiveness. You know, we want our system to do something. That's why we're buying it or making it. The system has got to be suitable for its use. We've got some time and cost constraints, and we've got a life cycle. Okay, so we can imagine we are developing something from concept, from cradle through to grave. And what are we developing? Well, we're developing a system, an organization of hardware, software, maybe material, facilities, people, data, and services needed to perform a designated function within a stated or defined operating environment, and intended to produce specified results. Okay, so really we've got three things there. We've got the system, we've got the operating environment within which it works or is intended to work, and the thing that it's supposed to produce, its function or its application. What do we, why did we buy it or make it in the first place? What's it supposed to do? What benefits is it supposed to bring humankind in the big picture? So that's what a system is, and I'm not going to elaborate on systems theory or anything like that. That's a whole big subject on its own, but we're talking about something complex. We're not talking about a toaster. It's not consumer goods. It's something complicated that operates in the real world. And as I say, we need to understand those three things: system, environment, purpose, in order to work out safety. Okay, so we've sorted out our context. How is all this going to happen? Well, actually, we need a process. And in the standard that we're going to look at in the next module, we have an 8-element process. And as you can see there, we start with documenting our approach. We identify and document hazards. Actually, we document everything according to the standard, so I'll forget that. So we assess risk. We think about how we're going to mitigate the risk. So we identify risk mitigation measures, or controls as they're often known. We apply those controls to reduce risk. We verify and validate that the risk reduction that we have achieved, or that we think we will achieve. And then we've got to get somebody to accept that risk. In other words, to say that it is an acceptable level of risk, that we can tolerate or put up with this level of risk in exchange for the benefits that the system is going to give us. Okay. And then finally, we need to manage risk through the entire life cycle for whatever this system is, until we finally get rid of it. Okay, so key points about this: whatever process we're going to follow, we need to follow a rigorous process systematically. So we're taking a structured and rigorous approach to looking at our system. And as you can see there from the arrows, every step in the 8-element sequence supports and enables the following steps. We document the results as we go. However, even this is a little bit too simple. Okay, so let's get a more realistic process. So what we've got here We've got the same things we had before. We've got to establish the context at the beginning. Then we've got some risk assessment, which consists of risk identification, risk analysis, and risk evaluation, saying, you know, where are we relative to some yardstick or some framework that determines whether a risk is acceptable or not. And then, having determined whether the risk is acceptable or not, we may need to apply some risk treatment in order to further reduce the risk, okay? And then hopefully we've got the risk down to an acceptable level. Okay, so that's the straight through process once through, okay? However, in the real world, we may have to go around this path several times. So having treated the risk, okay, over a period of time, we need to monitor and review it to make sure that the risk turns out in reality to be what we estimated it to be, or at least no worse, okay? If it turns out to be better, well, that's great. And on that monitoring and review cycle, maybe we even need to go back because the context has changed and said, okay, maybe we are now using the system to do something it was not originally intended to do. Maybe we've modified the system, or we want it to operate in a wider variety of environments, okay? Whatever it might be, the context has changed, and therefore we need to look again at the risk assessment and go around that loop again. And while we're doing all of that, we need to communicate with other people, whether it be end users, other stakeholders, other people who have safety responsibilities who we have to work with, and we have to consult people. We may have to consult workers. Again, we may have to consult the public, people that we put at risk, other duty holders who hold a duty to manage risk. So that's our cycle. That's more realistic. In my experience as a safety engineer, this is much more realistic. A once through process often just doesn't cut it. Okay. So we're doing all of this in order to drive risk down to an acceptable level. Well, what do we mean by that? Well, there's several different ways that we can do this, and I've got two illustrated here. So on the left, we have what's usually known as the ALARP triangle, okay? So on the left, we have this thing that looks a bit like a carrot, where the width of the triangle indicates the amount of risk, okay? So at the top of the triangle, we've got lots of risk, and if you're in the UK or Australia, where I now live, this is the way it's done. So there will be some level of risk that is intolerable, okay? Then if the risk isn't intolerable, then we can tolerate it or accept it only if it is ALARP or SSRAP. And that means ALARP means it's that we've reduced the risk as low as reasonably practicable, and SSRAP means so far as is reasonably practicable. Essentially, it's the same thing, reasonably practicable, okay? So we must ensure that we have applied all reasonably practicable risk reduction measures. And once we've done so, if we're in this tolerable or broadly acceptable region, then we can live with the risk. The law allows us to do that. So that's how it's done in the UK and Australia. But in other jurisdictions, say the USA, maybe you use a risk matrix approach, as we have on the right here. And this, in fact, this is the risk matrix taken from the standard we're just about to look at. And maybe we can take that and say, okay, we've determined what the risk is. There's no absolute limit on how much risk we can accept, but the higher the risk, the more senior level of sign-off from management we need, okay? So effectively, you're prioritizing the risk and bringing the worst risks to the attention of senior management, okay? Saying, will you accept this? or effectively, are you prepared to spend the money or restrict the operation of the system in order to reduce the risk? Okay, so that's good because that's pushing people with authority who are responsible to consider risks and make meaningful decisions. Okay, so horses for courses, different approaches are legal in different jurisdictions. Okay. So in module 2, we've said, well, we've asked ourselves, how can we deal with real world complexity? And one of the ways that's been developed to do that is called system safety, where we take a systematic approach to safety. Both the system itself, the product we consider as a system, and the process that we follow is a systematic process. So we address product and process. We need that process, that rigor, in order to give us confidence that what we've done is good enough. We have a realistic, useful, and powerful process that enables us to put things in context, to communicate with everyone we need to consult with those that we have a duty to consult with. And also, we put around the basic risk process this monitoring and review. And of course, we analyze risk for the purpose of reducing it to acceptable levels. So we've got to treat the risk or reduce it or control it in some way to get it to those acceptable levels. Okay. And it's all about ultimately getting that required risk reduction that makes the risk acceptable to expose human beings to for the benefit that it will give us.